icing and chocolate fudge icing and salted caramel Lindor chocolates on the top of it.
Oh my.
Oh, it's what? Say that again, but say it sexy.
I couldn't possibly.
Oh, Katie!
Yeah, you good. Come on.
It's my Nick's birthday tomorrow.
Oh.
Does he know?
Yes.
Okay. It's not
It would be
surprising.
quite difficult for me to make a cake without him knowing about it.
That is very fair. Oh. How's everyone doing today?
I'm okay. We have made a section of our garden into mostly a hole,
Have you got a dead body to bury?
and then did lots of sums. Not yet, but if you have any, there's a hole now.
Ooh, okay, that's good to know.
It's always nice to have options.
Everyone needs a friend who will bury a body if you need it. Who else have we got? Hi, Ivan.
Look at my lovely scale drawings
Ooh.
Wait, what?
with like numbers on and stuff.
Holy shit.
Oh, nice.
Numbers and drawings.
Which bits have you built?
We haven't built any of it. We have to dig the hole first.
Uh-huh. Actually, last time I spoke, I think you were talking about techniques. Have you got all your methods and construction things going?
Hole digging techniques.
It was mainly how you're going to put it all together, I think you were talking about last time.
Hey, Andrada.
Yeah, there's been much discussion about joints.
That's the word. Yeah.
Mike's here. Mike's here. And potentially Pontouf, albeit hidden behind a veil of secrecy and anonymity.
I love joints.
Some nice clouds.
You're looking wonderfully hairy, Mike.
Thank you. It's going sideways now. I'm admiring Andrada's hair. It looks awesome. That's a really cool colour.
Thanks. I just did it yesterday.
Beautiful.
I'm enjoying the fluffiness of your hair, Mike.
Yeah, that's Mike. That's adorable. That's very cute. Oh no! Don't do that. That just makes it worse. No, no.
Oh dear.
You shush your face. Oh, I'm
How's
excited
Frankie?
for this. Yes, my darling.
How are you, Frankie?
Is that Katie? Yes. Hello, Katie. What were you saying?
How are you?
I am good. I am back up north. I am
know.
back in the northern place.
Is that okay?
It's okay. It's okay. It's sad. It's a bit on the sad side. But my mum is here, which is nice, which she wasn't in Bristol. And all of my stuff is here.
All of your books.
All of my books. My books are here.
I mean, you didn't take them all with you?
They're beautiful.
All of my books are here. Oh my! I took so many books with me. I took like a bag full of books with me.
Good.
Read 2.
I read 2 books. 2 books in 2 weeks is not bad. That's fine. Hi, Tabby.
Hi.
Abby.
How are you doing? Lisa's here. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Michael's here. Excellent. I thought for a second that we were down on our Michael quota. That would have been very sad.
Especially for week
Would
Are you
you
allowed
need
to
a
continue
birthday
without a
phone
Michael?
for Nick tomorrow?
Oh, sorry. That was 2 people speaking, and I didn't hear either of them. Who was it, and what did you say?
I think Katie said something about Nick.
Katie, what did you say about Nick, sweetie?
Would you read him a birthday poem tomorrow?
I would love to read him a birthday poem. Does he have a particular request, or do you have one that you would recommend for him?
No, you can choose one which seems nippy to you.
Oh, my pressure's on. Pressure's on, yeah.
You have impeccable taste.
Oh, you.
I was quite upset in a way that Lisa chose to spend her birthday by a reservoir with a fire, and we did not get to hear what you would think a good Lisa birthday poem would be.
Oh, God.
I'm happy to have another birthday, if that would be useful.
Yeah, I think we would all appreciate that.
Cool. Just let me know when.
Excellent. That's good to know. Hi, Ian. Who else have we got?
Ian.
Hi, Ian. Hi, Michael. My God, so many Michaels. Jonathan's here. Ah! What a lovely gang.
It's always a lovely gang.
It's
More and more people
always
join,
lovely.
and yet there's only the other 9.
Well, how are we doing for time, by the way?
3 minutes.
Excellent. We can continue this pleasing chatter.
I love how happy you are to see everyone. It makes my night.
Spare Michael.
Because you're all so lovely. What's not to be happy about, huh? Huh? How does Lisa have a penguin? Lisa, do you have a penguin?
I do.
What?
I only know how to make it happen on an Apple. I don't know how to make it happen on a proper computer. If you're using an Apple, then it's Control Command Space, and then you can pick all kinds of emojis.
Oh, I see. I've just seen. I was sort of expecting to see one like float up on screen or appear in the background or something.
Nothing that impressive.
I see. I see you. I wonder if I can get one. What would mine be?
That looks sort of very much like a certain well-known book publisher. I'm so excited to start this book, by the way. I'm very, very excited.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. How are we doing? Can we start yet? Can we start
Yes, start. Let's start.
Starting.
Frankie, you're
Before
adorable.
Frankie actually bursts.
I mean,
Let me
Frankie.
find my pipe and moustache.
get down to business.
To defeat the Huns.
Yes! Yes! Katie wins. Okay, right. Okay, right. Right. So. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed. Chapter 1, in which Cimmerine refuses to be proper and has a conversation with a frog. Linderwall was a large kingdom just east of the Mountains of Mourning, where philosophers were highly respected and the number 5 was fashionable. The climate was unremarkable. The knights kept their armour brightly polished, mainly for show. It had been centuries since a dragon had come east. There were the usual periodic problems with royal children and uninvited fairy godmothers, but they were always the sort of thing that could be cleared up by finding the proper prince or princess to marry the unfortunate child a few years later. All in all, Linderwall was a very prosperous and pleasant place. Cimmerine hated it. Cimmerine was the youngest daughter of the king of Linderwall, and her parents found her rather trying. Their first 6 daughters were perfectly normal princesses, with long golden hair and sweet dispositions, each one more beautiful than the last. Cimarine was lovely enough, but her hair was jet black, and she wore it in braids instead of curled and pinned like her sisters. And she wouldn't stop growing. Her parents were quite sure that no prince would want to marry a girl who could look him in the eye instead of gazing up at him becomingly through her lashes. As for the girl's disposition, well, when people were being polite, they said she was strong-minded. When they were angry or annoyed with her, they said she was as stubborn as a pig. The king and queen did the best they could. They hired the most superior tutors and governesses to teach Cimarine all the things a princess ought to know: dancing, embroidery, drawing, and etiquette. There was a great deal of etiquette, from the proper way to curtsy before a visiting prince to how loudly it was permissible to scream when being carried off by a giant. Lindenwold still had an occasional problem with giants. Cimarine found it all very dull, but she pressed her lips together and learned it anyway. When she couldn't stand it any longer, she would go down to the castle armoury and bully the arms master into giving her a fencing lesson. As she got older, she found her regular lessons more and more boring. Consequently, the fencing lessons became more and more frequent. When she was 12, her father found out. "Fencing is not proper behaviour for a princess," he told her, in the gentle but firm tone recommended by the court philosopher. Cimarine tilted her head to one side. "Why not?" It's simply not done." Cimarine considered. "Aren't I a princess?" "Yes, of course you are, my dear," said her father with relief. He had been bracing himself for a storm of tears, which was the way his other daughters reacted to reprimands. "Well, I fence," Cimarine said, with the air of one delivering an unshakable argument. "So it is too done by a princess." "That doesn't make it proper, dear," put in her mother gently. "Why not?" "It simply doesn't," the Queen said firmly, and that was the end of Cimarine's fencing lessons. When she was 14, her father discovered that she was making the court magician teach her magic. "How long has this been going on?" he asked wearily when she arrived in response to his summons. "Since you stopped my fencing lessons," Cimarine said. "I suppose you're going to tell me it isn't proper behaviour for a princess." "Well, yes. It isn't proper." "Nothing interesting seems to be proper," Cimarine said. "You might find things more interesting if you applied yourself a little more, dear," Cimarine's mother said. "I doubt it," Cimarine muttered, but she knew better than to argue when her mother used that tone of voice. And that was the end of the magic lessons. The same thing happened over the Latin lessons from the court philosopher, the cooking lessons from the castle chef, the economics lessons from the court treasurer, and the juggling lessons from the court minstrel. Cimarine began to grow rather tired of the whole business. When she was 16, Cimarine summoned her fairy godmother. "Cimarine, my dear, this sort of thing really isn't done," the fairy said, fanning away the scented blue smoke that had accompanied her appearance. "People keep telling me that," Cimarine said. "You should pay attention to them then," her godmother said irritably. "I'm not used to being hauled away from my tea without warning, and you aren't supposed to call me unless it is a matter of utmost importance to your life and future happiness." "It is of utmost importance to my life and future happiness," Cimarine said. "Oh, very well. You're a bit young to have fallen in love already. Still, you always have been a precocious child. Tell me about him." Cimarine sighed. "It isn't a him." "Enchanted, is he?" the fairy said with a spark of interest. "A frog, perhaps? That used to be quite popular, but it seems to have gone out of fashion lately. Nowadays, all the princes are talking birds, or dogs, or hedgehogs." No, I'm not in love with anyone." "Then what exactly is your problem?" the fairy said in exasperation. "This," Cimarine gestured at the castle around her. "Embroidery lessons and dancing and being a princess." "My Dear Cimarine, the fairy said, shocked. It's your heritage. It's boring. Boring? The fairy did not appear to believe what she was hearing. Boring. I want to do things, not sit around all day and listen to the court minstrel make up songs about how brave Daddy is and how lovely his wife and daughters are. Nonsense, my dear. This is just a stage you're going through. You'll outgrow it soon and you'll be very glad you didn't do anything rash. Cimarine looked at her godmother suspiciously. You've been talking to my parents, haven't you? Well, they do try to keep me up to date on what my godchildren are doing. I thought so, said Cimarine, and bade her fairy godmother a polite goodbye. A few weeks later, Cimarine's parents took her to a tourney in Saffron by the Mountains, the next kingdom over. Cimarine was quite sure that they were only taking her because her fairy godmother had told them that something had better be done about her, and soon. She kept this opinion to herself. Anything was better than the endless rounds of dancing and embroidery lessons at home. Cimarine realised her mistake almost as soon as they reached their destination, for the king of Saffron by the Mountains had a son. He was a golden-haired, blue-eyed and exceedingly handsome prince, whose duties appeared to consist entirely of dancing attendance on Cimarine. Isn't he handsome? Cimarine's lady-in-waiting sighed. Yes, Cimarine said without enthusiasm. Unfortunately, he isn't anything else. Whatever do you mean? The lady-in-waiting said in astonishment. He has no sense of humour, he isn't intelligent, he can't talk about anything except tourneys, and half of what he does say he gets wrong. I'm glad we're only staying 3 weeks. I don't think I could stand to be polite to him for much longer than that. But what about your engagement? The lady-in-waiting cried, horrified. What engagement? Cimarine said sharply. The lady-in-waiting tried to mutter something about a mistake, but Cimarine put up her chin in her best princess fashion and insisted on an explanation. Finally, the lady-in-waiting broke down. I overheard their majesties discussing it yesterday. She sniffled into her handkerchief. The stipulations and covenants and contracts and settlements have all been drawn up, and they're going to sign them the day after tomorrow and announce it on Thursday. I see, said Cimarine. Thank you for telling me. You may go. The lady-in-waiting left, and Cimarine went to see her parents. They were annoyed and a little embarrassed to find that Cimarine had discovered their plans, but they were still very firm about it. We were going to tell you tomorrow when we signed the papers, her father said. We knew you'd be pleased, dear, her mother said, nodding. He's such a good-looking boy. But I don't want to marry Prince Thorindil, Cimarine said. Well, it's not exactly a brilliant match, Cimarine's father said, frowning, but I didn't think you'd care how big his kingdom is. It's the prince I don't care for, Cimarine said. That's a great pity, dear, but it can't be helped, Cimarine's mother said placidly. I'm afraid it isn't likely that you'll get another offer. Then I won't get married at all. Both her parents looked slightly shocked. My dear Cimarine, said her father, that's out of the question. You're a princess. It simply isn't done. I'm too young to get married. Your great-aunt Rose was married at 16, her mother pointed out. One really can't count all those years she spent asleep under that dreadful fairy's curse. I won't marry the Prince of Saffron by the Mountains, Cimarine said desperately. It isn't proper. What? Said both her parents together. He hasn't rescued me from a giant or an ogre or freed me from a magic spell, Cimarine said. Both her parents looked uncomfortable. Well, no, said Cimarine's father. It's a bit late to start arranging it, but we might be able to manage something. I don't think it's necessary, Cimarine's mother said. She looked reprovingly at Cimarine. You've never paid attention to what was or wasn't suitable before, dear. You can't start now. Proper or not, you will marry Prince Thorindil 3 weeks from Thursday. But, Mother, I'll send the wardrobe mistress to your room to start fitting your bride clothes, Cimmereen's mother said firmly, and that was the end of the conversation. Cimmereen decided to try a more direct approach. She went to see Prince Thorindil. He was in the castle armoury looking at swords. "Good morning, Princess," he said when he finally noticed Cimmereen. "Don't you think this is a lovely sword?" Cimmereen picked it up. "The balance is off." "I believe you're right," said Thorindil after a moment's study. "Pity. Now I'll have to find another. Is there something I can do for you?" "Yes," said Cimmereen. "You can not marry me." "What?" Thorindil looked confused. "You don't really want to marry me, do you?" Cimmereen said coaxingly. Well, not exactly," Thorindil replied. "I mean, in a way. That is—" "Oh, good," Cimmereen said, correctly interpreting this muddled reply as "no, not at all. Then you'll tell your father you don't want to marry me." "I couldn't do that," Thorindil said, shocked. "It wouldn't be right." "Why not?" Cimmereen demanded crossly. Because princes just don't do that." "Then how are you going to keep from marrying me?" "I guess I won't be able to," Thorindil said after thinking hard for a moment. "How do you like that sword over there, the one with the silver hilt?" Cimmereen left in disgust and went out to the castle garden. She was very discouraged. It looked as if she were going to marry the Prince of Sathan by the Mountains, whether she wanted to or not. "I'd rather be eaten by a dragon," she muttered. "That can be arranged," said a voice from beside her left slipper. Cimmereen looked down and saw a small green frog looking up at her. "I beg your pardon? Did you speak?" she asked. "You don't see anyone else around, do you?" said the frog. "Oh," said Cimmereen. She'd never met a talking frog before. "Are you an enchanted prince?" she asked a little doubtfully. "No, but I've met a couple of them, and after a while you pick up a few things," said the frog. "Now, why is it that you want to be eaten by a dragon?" "My parents want me to marry Prince Thorindil," Cimmereen explained. "And you don't want to? Sensible of you," said the frog. "I don't like Thorindil. He used to skip rocks across the top of my pond. They always sank into my living room." "I'm sorry," Cimmereen said politely. "Well," said the frog, "what are you going to do about it?" "Marrying Thorindil? I don't know. I've tried talking to my parents, but they won't listen, and neither will Thorindil." "I didn't ask what you said about it," the frog snapped. "I asked what you're going to do. 9 times out of 10, talking is a way of avoiding doing things." "What kind of things would you suggest?" Cimmereen said, stung. "You could challenge the prince to a duel," the frog suggested. "He'd win," Cimmereen said. "It's been 4 years since I've been allowed to do any fencing." "You could turn him into a toad." "I never got past invisibility in my magic lessons," Cimmereen said. "Transformations are advanced study." The frog looked at her disapprovingly. "Can't you do anything?" "I can curtsy," Cimmereen said disgustedly. "I know 17 different country dances, 9 ways to agree with an ambassador from Cathay without actually promising him anything, and 143 embroidery stitches. And I can make Cherry's Jubilee." "Cherry's Jubilee?" asked the frog and snapped at a passing fly. "The castle chef taught me before father made him stop," Cimmereen explained. The frog munched briefly, then swallowed and said, "I suppose there's no help for it. You'll have to run away." "Run away?" Cimmereen said. "I don't like that idea. Too many things could go wrong." "You don't like the idea of marrying Prince Thorindil either," the frog pointed out. "Maybe I can think of some other way out of getting married." The frog snorted. "Such as?" Cimmereen didn't answer, and after a moment the frog said, "I thought so. Do you want my advice or not?" "Yes, please," said Cimmereen. After all, she didn't have to follow it. "Go to the main road outside the city and follow it away from the mountains," said the frog. After a while, you will come to a small pavilion made of gold, surrounded by trees made of silver with emerald leaves. Go straight past it without stopping, and don't answer if anyone calls out to you from the pavilion. Keep on until you reach a hovel. Walk straight up to the door and knock 3 times, then snap your fingers and go inside. You'll find some people there who can help you out of your difficulties if you're polite about asking and they're in the right mood. And that's all. The frog turned abruptly and dove into the pool. Thank you very much, Cimarine called after it, thinking that the frog's advice sounded very odd indeed. She rose and went back into the castle. She spent the rest of the day being fitted and fussed over by her ladies-in-waiting until she was ready to scream. By the end of the formal banquet, at which she had to sit next to Prince Thorindil and listen to endless stories of his prowess in battle, Cimarine was more than ready to take the frog's advice. Late that night, when most of the castle was asleep, Cimarine bundled up 5 clean handkerchiefs and her best crown. Then she dug out the notes she had taken during her magic lessons and carefully cast a spell of invisibility. It seemed to work, but she was still very watchful as she sneaked out of the castle. After all, it had been a long time since she'd practiced. By morning, Cimarine was well outside the city and visible again, walking down the main road that led away from the mountains. It was hot and dusty, and she began to wish she had brought a bottle of water instead of the handkerchiefs. Just before noon, she spied a small grove of trees next to the road ahead of her. It looked like a cool, pleasant place to rest for a few minutes, and she hurried forward. When she reached the grove, however, she saw that the trees were made of the finest silver, and their shining green leaves were huge emeralds. In the centre of the grove stood a charming pavilion made of gold and hung with gold curtains. Cimarine slowed down and looked longingly at the cool green shade beneath the trees. Just then, a woman's voice called out from the pavilion, "My dear, you look so tired and thirsty. Come and sit with me and share my luncheon." The voice was so kind and coaxing that Cimarine took 2 steps towards the edge of the road before she remembered the frog's advice. "Oh no," she thought to herself, "I'm not going to be caught this easily." She turned without saying anything and hurried on down the road. A little farther on, she came to a tiny, wretched-looking hovel made of cracked and weathered grey boards. The door hung slantwise on a broken hinge, and the whole building looked as though it were going to topple over at any moment. Cimarine stopped and stared doubtfully at it, but she had followed the frog's advice this far, and she thought it would be silly to stop now. So she shook the dust from her skirts and put on her crown so as to make a good impression. She marched up to the door, knocked 3 times, and snapped her fingers just as the frog had told her. Then she pushed the door open and went in. How are we doing for time? What time is it?
Loads of time.
It's a time? One more chapter?
Only 1/2
Yes.
2 more
Okay.
chapters.
Let's see how we do after another one.
Okay.
Okay. Round again. Chapter 2, in which Cimarine discovers the value of a classical education and has some unwelcome visitors. Inside, the hovel was dark and cool and damp. Cimarine found it a pleasant relief after the hot, dusty road, but she wondered why no sunlight seemed to be coming through the cracks in the boards. She was still standing just inside the door, waiting for her eyes to adjust to the dark, when someone said crossly, "Is this that princess we've been waiting for?" "Why don't you ask her?" said a deep, rumbly voice. "I'm Princess Cimarine of Linderwall," Cimarine answered politely. "I was told you could help me." "Help her?" said the first voice, and Cimarine heard a snort. "I think we should just eat her and be done with it." Cimarine began to feel frightened. She wondered whether the voices belonged to ogres or trolls, and whether she could slip out of the hovel before they made up their minds about eating her. She felt behind her for the door and started in surprise when her fingers touched damp stone instead of dry wood. Then a third voice said, "Not so fast, Waraug. Let's hear her story first." So Cimmerine took a deep breath and began to explain about the fencing lessons and the magic lessons and the Latin and the juggling and all the other things that weren't considered proper behaviour for a princess. And she told the voices that she had run away from Sathan by the Mountains to keep from having to marry Prince Thorindil. "And what do you expect us to do about it?" one of the voices asked curiously. "I don't know," Cimmerine said. "Except, of course, that I would rather not be eaten. I can't see who you are in the dark, you know." "That can be fixed," said the voice. A moment later, a small ball of light appeared in the air above Cimmerine's head. Cimmerine stepped backward very quickly and ran into the wall. The voices belonged to dragons. 5 of them lay on or sprawled over or curled around the various rocks and columns that filled the huge cave where Cimmerine stood. Each of the males, there were 3, had 2 short, stubby, sharp-looking horns on either side of their heads. The female dragon had 3, 1 on each side and 1 in the centre of her forehead. The last dragon was apparently still too young to have made up its mind which sex it wanted to be. It didn't have any horns at all. Cimmerine felt very frightened. The smallest of the dragons was easily as 3 times as tall as she was, and they gave an overwhelming impression of shining green scales and sharp silver teeth. They were much scarier in person than in the pictures she remembered from her natural history books. She swallowed very hard, wondering whether she really would rather be eaten by a dragon than marry Thorindil. "Well," said the 3-horned dragon just in front of her, "just what are you asking us to do for you?" Cimmerine stopped short as an idea occurred to her. Cautiously she asked, "Dragons are fond of princesses, aren't they?" "Very," said the dragon, and smiled. The smile showed all her teeth, which Cimmerine did not find reassuring. "That is, I've heard of dragons who have captive princesses to cook for them and so on," said Cimmerine.
Your sound's gone, Frankie.
"Oh no.
You're back now.
Am I back?"
Yeah, I heard cook for them.
I could hear it, okay?
Yeah, it didn't go for me at all.
What was the last thing you heard, Katie?
For them.
Cook for them, and so on. Yeah, that's pretty much where we got to. "Cook for them and so on," said Cimmerine, who had very little idea what captive princesses did all day. The dragon in front of Cimmerine nodded. One of the others, a yellowish green in colour, shifted restlessly and said, "Oh, let's just go ahead and eat her. It will save trouble." Before any of the other dragons could answer, there was a loud booming noise, and a 6th dragon slithered into the cave. His scales were more grey than green, and the dragons by the door made way for him respectfully. "Kazul," said the newcomer in a loud voice. "Achoo! Sorry I'm late, but a terrible thing happened on the way here. Achoo!" "What was it?" said the dragon to whom Cimmerine had been talking. "Ran into a wizard. Had to eat him. No help for it. And now look at me." Every time the grey-green dragon sneezed, he emitted a small ball of fire that scorched the wall of the cave. "Calm down, Roxim," said Kazul. "You're only making it worse." "Calm down when I'm having an allergy attack. Oh, bother," said the grey-green dragon. "Somebody give me a handkerchief." "Here," said Cimmerine, holding out one of the ones she had brought with her. "Use this." She was beginning to feel much less frightened, for the grey-green dragon reminded her of her great-uncle, who was old and rather hard of hearing, and of whom she was rather fond. "What's that?" said Roxim. "Oh, hurry up and give it here." Kazul took the handkerchief from Cimmerine, using 2 claws very delicately, and passed it to Roxim. The grey-green dragon mopped his streaming eyes and blew his nose. "That's better, I think. Oh, drat." The ball of fire that accompanied the dragon's sneeze had reduced the handkerchief to a charred scrap. Cimarine hastily dug out another one and handed it to Kazul, feeling very glad that she had brought several spares. Roxham went through 2 more handkerchiefs before his sneezing spasms finally stopped. "Much better," he said. "Now then, who's this that's lent me the handkerchiefs? Somebody's new princess, eh?" "We were just discussing that when you came in," Kazul said, and turned back to Cimarine. "You were saying about cooking and so on." "Couldn't I do that for one of you for a while?" Cimarine said. The dragon smiled again, and Cimarine swallowed hard. "Possibly. Why would you want to do that?" "Because then I wouldn't have to go home and marry Thorindale," Cimarine said. "Being a dragon's princess is a perfectly respectable thing to do, so my parents couldn't complain, and it would be much more interesting than embroidery and dancing lessons." Several of the dragons made snorting or choking noises. Cimarine jumped, then decided that they were laughing. "This is ridiculous," said a large, bright green dragon on Cimarine's left. "Why?" asked Kazul. "A princess volunteering? Out of the question." "That's easy for you to say," one of the other dragons grumbled. "You already have a princess. What about the rest of us?" "Yes, don't be stuffy, Waraug," said another. "Besides, what else can we do with her?" "Eat her?" suggested the yellowish-green dragon in a bored tone. "No proper princess would come out looking for dragons," Waraug objected. "Well, I'm not a proper princess then," Cimarine snapped. "I make Cherry's Jubilee, and I volunteer for dragons, and I conjugate Latin verbs, or at least I would if anyone would let me. So there." "Hear, hear," said the grey-green dragon. "You see," Waraug said, "who would want an improper princess?" "I would," said Kazul. "You can't be serious, Kazul," Waraug said irritably. "Why?" "I like Cherry's Jubilee," Kazul replied, still watching Cimarine. "And I like the look of her. Besides, the Latin scrolls in my library need cataloguing, and if I can't find someone who knows a little of the language, I'll have to do it myself." "Give her a trial run first," a purplish-green dragon advised. Waraug snorted. "Latin and Cherry's Jubilee. And for that you take on a black-haired, snippy little—" "I'll thank you to be polite when you're discussing my princess," Kazul said, and smiled fiercely. "Nice little girl," Roxham said, nodding approvingly and waving Cimarine's next-to-last handkerchief. "Good sense. Be good for you, Kazul." "If that's settled, I'm going to go find a snack," said the yellowish-green dragon. Waraug looked around, but the other dragons seemed to agree with Roxham. "Oh, very well," Waraug said grumpily. "It's your choice after all, Kazul." "It certainly is. Now, princess, if you'll come this way, I'll get you settled in." Cimarine followed Kazul across the cave and down a tunnel. To her relief, the ball of light came with her. She had the uncomfortable feeling that if she had tried to walk behind Kazul in the dark, she would have stepped on her tail, which would not have been a good beginning. Kazul led Cimarine through a long maze of tunnels and finally stopped in another cave. "Here we are," the dragon said. "You can use the small room over on the right. I believe my last princess left most of the furnishings behind when she ran off with the knight." "Thank you," Cimarine said. "When do I start my duties? And what are they, please?" "You start right away," said Kazul. "I'll want dinner at 7. In the meantime, you can begin sorting the treasure." The dragon nodded towards a dark opening on the left. "I'm sure some of it needs repairing. There's at least one suit of armor with the leg off, and some of the cheaper magic swords are probably getting rusty. The rest of it really ought to be rearranged sensibly. I can never find anything when I want it." "What about the library you mentioned?" Cimarine asked. "We'll see how well you do on the treasure room first," Kazul said. "The rest of your job I'll explain as we go along. You don't object to learning a little magic, do you?" "Not at all," said Cimarine. "Good. It'll make things much easier. Go and wash up, and I'll let you into the treasure room so you can get started." Simmerine nodded and went to the room Kazul had told her to use. As she washed her face and hands, she felt happier than she had in a long time. She was not going to have to marry Thorindil, and sorting a dragon's treasure sounded far more interesting than dancing or embroidery. She was even going to learn some magic. And her parents wouldn't worry about her once they found out where she was. For the first time in her life, Simmerine was glad she was a princess. She dried her hands and turned to go back into the main cave, wondering how best to persuade Kazul to let her brush up on her Latin. She didn't want the dragon to be disappointed in her skill. Draco, draconim, dracone, she muttered, and her lips curved into a smile. She'd always been rather good at declining nouns. Still smiling, she started forward to begin her new duties. Simmerine settled in very quickly. She got along well with Kazul and learned her way around the caves with a minimum of mishaps. Actually, the caves were more like an intricate web of tunnels, connecting caverns of various shapes and sizes that belonged to individual dragons. It reminded Simmerine of an underground city with tunnels instead of streets. She had no idea how far the tunnels extended, though she rather suspected that some of them had been magicked, so that when you walked down them, you went a lot farther than you thought you were going. Kazul's section of the caves was fairly large. In addition to the kitchen, which was in a large cave near the exit, so there wouldn't be a problem with the smoke from the fire, she had a sleeping cavern, 3 enormous treasure rooms at the far end of an intricate maze of twisty little passages, 2 even more enormous storage rooms for less valuable items, a library, a large bear cave for eating and visiting with other dragons, and the set of rooms assigned to Simmerine. All the caves smelled of dragon, a somewhat musty, smoky, cinnamony smell. Simmerine's first job was to air them out. Simmerine's rooms consisted of 3 small connecting caves just off Kazul's living cavern. They were furnished very comfortably in a mixture of styles and periods, and looked just like the guest rooms in most of the castles Simmerine had visited, only without windows. They were much too small for a dragon to get inside. When asked, Kazul said that the dwarves had made them in return for a favour, and the dragon's tone prevented Simmerine from inquiring too closely into just what sort of favour it had been. By the end of the first week, Simmerine was sure enough of her position to give Kazul a list of things that she needed in the kitchen. The previous princess, of whom Simmerine was beginning to have a very poor opinion, had apparently made do with a large skillet with 3 dents and a wobbly handle, a wooden mixing bowl with a crack in it, a badly tarnished copper tea kettle, and an assortment of mismatched plates, cups, and silverware, most of them chipped or bent. Kazul seemed pleased by the request, and the following day Simmerine had everything she had asked for, except for a few of the more exotic pans and dishes. This made the cooking considerably easier, and gave Simmerine more time to spend studying Latin and sorting treasure. The treasure was just as disorganized as Kazul had told her, and putting it in order was a major task. It was sometimes hard to tell whether a ring was enchanted, and Simmerine knew better than to put it on and see. It might be the useful sort of magic ring that turned you invisible, but it might also be the sort of ring that turned you into a frog. Simmerine did the best she could, and kept a pile in the corner for things she was not sure about. There was a great deal of treasure to be sorted. Most of it was stacked in one of the innermost caves in a large, untidy heap of crowns, rings, jewels, swords, and coins. But Simmerine kept finding things in other places as well, some of them quite unlikely. There was a small helmet under her bed, along with a great deal of dust, a silver bracelet set with opals on the reading table in the library, and 2 daggers and a jewelled ink pot behind the kitchen stove. Simmerine collected them all, along with the other things that were simply lying around in the halls, and put them back in the storerooms where they belonged, thinking to herself that dragons were clearly not very tidy creatures. The first of the nights arrived at the end of the 2nd week. Simmerine was busy cleaning swords. Kazul had been right about their condition. Not only were some of them rusty, but nearly all of them needed sharpening. She was polishing the last flakes of rust from an enormous broadsword when she heard someone calling from the mouth of the cave. Feeling somewhat irritated by the interruption, she rose and, carrying the sword, went to see who it was. As she came nearer to the entrance, she was able to make out the words that whoever it was shouting. "Dragon, come out and fight! Fight for the Princess Cimarine of Linderwall!" "Oh, honestly," Cimarine muttered and quickened her step. "Here, you," she said as she came out into the sunlight. Then she had to duck as a spear flashed through the air over her head. "Stop that!" she cried. "I'm Princess Cimarine." "You are?" said a doubtful voice. "Are you sure? I mean..." Cimarine raised her head cautiously and squinted. It was still fairly early in the morning, and the sun was in back of the person standing outside the cave, so that it was difficult to see anything but the outline of his figure against the brightness. "Of course I'm sure," Cimarine said. "What do you expect? Letters of reference? Come around here where I can see who you are, please." The figure moved sideways, and Cimarine saw that it was a knight in shiny new armour, except for the legs, where the armour was dusty from walking. Cimarine wondered briefly why he hadn't ridden, but decided not to ask. The knight's visor was raised, and a few wisps of sandy hair showed above his handsome face. He was studying her with an expression of worried puzzlement. "What can I do for you?" Cimarine said after several moments had gone by and the knight still hadn't said anything. "Well, if you are the Princess Cimarine, I've come to rescue you from the dragon," the knight said. Cimarine set the point of the broadsword on the ground and leaned on it as if it were a walking cane. "I thought that might be it," she said, "but I'd rather not be rescued. Thank you just the same." "Not be rescued?" The knight's puzzled look deepened. "But princesses always—" "No, they don't," Cimarine said firmly, recognising the beginning of a familiar argument. "And even if I wanted to be rescued, you're going at it all wrong." "What?" said the knight, thoroughly taken aback. "Shouting, 'Come out and fight,' the way you did. No self-respecting dragon is going to answer to a challenge like that. It sounds like a child's dare. Dragons are very conscious of their dignity, at least all the ones I've met so far are." "Oh," said the knight, sounding very crestfallen. "What should I have said?" "Stand forth and do battle is the usual challenge," Cimarine said with authority, remembering her princess lessons. She had always been more interested in what the knights and dragons were supposed to say than in memorising the places where she was supposed to scream. But the wording doesn't have to be exact as long as it's suitably formal. You're new at this, aren't you? "Rescuing you was going to be my first big quest," the knight said gloomily. "You're sure you don't want to be rescued?" "Quite sure," Cimarine said. "I like living with Kazul." "You like?" The dragon stared at her for a moment. The knight stared at her for a moment, sorry. Then his expression cleared and he said, "Of course, the dragon's enchanted you. I should have thought of that before." "Kazul has not enchanted me, and I do not want to be rescued by anybody," Cimarine said, alarmed by the knight's sudden enthusiasm. "This place suits me very well. I like polishing swords and cooking Cherry's Jubilee and reading Latin scrolls. If you don't believe me, ask anyone in Linderwall. They've been complaining about my unprincess-like behaviour for years." "I did hear something about fencing lessons," the knight said doubtfully, "but knights aren't supposed to pay attention to that kind of thing. We're supposed to be above rumours and gossip." "The fencing lessons were just the beginning," Cimarine assured him. "So you see why I'm perfectly happy being a dragon's princess." Yes," said the knight, but he did not look convinced. "Speaking of dragons, where's yours?" "Kazul's not my dragon," Cimarine said sharply. "I'm her princess. You'll never have any luck dealing with dragons if you don't get these things straight. She's gone to the enchanted forest on the other side of the mountains to borrow a crepe pan from a witch she knows." "She's what?" said the knight. She's gone to borrow a crepe pan, Cimmerine repeated in a louder voice. Perhaps you'd better have your helmet checked when you get back. They're not supposed to interfere with your hearing, but sometimes... Oh, I heard you, the knight said. But what does the dragon want with a crepe pan? She doesn't want it. I do. I found a recipe in the library that I want to try, and the kitchen just isn't equipped to handle anything but the most ordinary cooking. Kazul will fix that eventually, but for the time being we have to borrow things like crepe pans and souffle dishes. You really do like it here, the knight said wonderingly. Cimmerine refrained from replying that this was what she had been trying to tell him all along, and instead said, How did you know where I was? Things get around. The knight waved a hand in a vague manner. In fact, I had to hurry to make sure I was first. Half of the kingdom of Linderwall in a princess's hand in marriage is a reward rich enough to tempt a lot of people who wouldn't normally bother with this sort of thing. Father's offered half the kingdom to whoever rescues me, Cimmerine said incredulously. That's somewhat more than all my sister's dowries put together. It's the usual thing in cases like this, the knight said mildly. It would be, Cimmerine said in tones of deep disgust. Well, at least you can go back and tell him that I don't want to be rescued. Maybe that will keep anyone else from coming up here. I can't do that, the knight said. It's just not done, Cimmerine finished. I understand perfectly. She gave him a polite farewell, more because she had been well brought up than because she felt like being polite, and sent him on his way. Then she went back into the cave and polished the broadsword until it was mirror bright, which relieved her feelings a little. There were 2 nights the following day, and 4 more the day after that. On the 4th day there was only 1, but he was exceptionally stubborn, and it took Cimmerine nearly 2 hours to get rid of him. By then she was thoroughly disgusted, and even considered letting Kazul handle the nights from then on. She could not quite bring herself to do it. The knights would certainly attack Kazul as soon as they saw her, since that was what they were coming for, and sooner or later someone would get hurt. Cimmerine did not like to think that someone might be hurt trying to rescue her, particularly since she did not want to be rescued. So with a sigh she decided that she would continue to handle the knights as long as Kazul would let her. Prince Thorindil showed up at the end of the 3rd week. He was limping a little as if his metal boots pinched his toes, and the feathers attached to the top of his helmet sagged badly. He stopped and carefully struck an impressive pose before issuing the usual challenge. Cimmerine was not in a mood to be impressed. Besides, she could see that his helmet was a different style from his gold armour, and that the armour had gaps at the knees and elbows where it didn't fit together quite right. Aren't you a little slow? She asked irritably. There have been 8 nights here before you. 8? The prince said, frowning. I thought by now there'd have been at least 12. Perhaps I'd better come back later. Cimmerine stared at him in surprise. Why? Well, it would look better, Thorindil explained seriously. There's not much glory in defeating a dragon that hasn't already beaten 10 or 15 people at least. Sir Gorolax of Merstwald won't even consider going after a dragon whose score is less than 45. I don't think I want to risk waiting that long, but 8 just doesn't seem like enough. You're going to go away and wait until Kazul has defeated 15 knights before you come back to rescue me, Cimmerine said. She found Thorindil's smug confidence very annoying, but she didn't like to say so straight out. Not if you'd rather be rescued now, of course, Thorindil said hastily. Though you ought to consider the advantages, and I expect it won't be so very long. His voice trailed off, and he looked at her hopefully. I'm afraid it will be a very long time, Cimmerine said with satisfaction. You see, Kazul hasn't defeated any knights at all yet. But I thought you said there'd been 8, Thorindil spluttered. I said 8 of them had come by. I didn't say they'd fought anybody. I sent them away. You sent them away? Thorindil repeated, plainly horrified. But that's... Not done, I know. Cimarine smiled sweetly. But I've done it. And I intend to go on doing it. So you might as well go home and warn your friends. They'd feel so foolish, you know, if they came all this way into the mountains to rescue me and then had to turn around and go back home without doing anything. They certainly would, Thorindil said indignantly. What do you mean by playing these kind of tricks? Don't you want to be rescued? No, said Cimarine, losing her patience at last. I don't. And I'm tired of having my work constantly interrupted. So please go away and don't come back. You can't possibly mean that, Thorindil said. Besides, everyone expects me to rescue you. That's your problem, Cimarine told him. I'm going to go fix dinner. Goodbye. Before he could say anything else, she turned and ducked back into the cave, hoping the prince wouldn't follow.
More.
What time is it?
It's 3 minutes to 10.
I think I'm going to leave it there for tonight. I feel like maybe two chapters a night seems that I think there's 15 chapters total. So we might do a bit of a big session on the grand finale. But how are people enjoying it so far?
It's really cute.
Yes. Every single one of the princes is Mr. Collins.
Yes. You even said the things that Mr. Collins would say about, oh no, you must be enchanted.
If you could give one of them a Mr. Collins voice, that would be amazing.
I will definitely do that. I'll definitely do that. The next one that comes along can be Mr. Collins.
I don't know what Cherry's Jubilee is, but I assume we're all making it for the finale, right?
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah, 100%.
What is it? Does anyone know?
It's a ice cream flavour, definitely, but that might be based on a different thing.
Ooh. So if people don't fancy making Cherry's Jubilee, they can just get like Cherry's Jubilee ice cream or just cherry ice cream, I guess.
I've never seen cherry ice cream anywhere.
Really?
That's really
It's so good.
I think
I've made cherry ice cream last week.
Ben and Jerry's do some sort of like a cherry, maybe like a cherry chocolate one.
Okay, so Cherry's Jubilee is a dessert dish made with cherries and liqueur, which is subsequently flambéed and commonly served as a sauce over vanilla ice cream.
Oh,
Damn.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Okay, so that is going to be for the last night. Bonus points if anyone manages to take photos or videos of themselves flambeing some cherries and post it on the story.
If you flambe them with a tiny dragon.
Very funny. Good work.
How many points if you flambe them with a huge dragon?
All the points. All the points.
How many points if you flambe them live on the video call?
Yeah.
With a huge dragon.
Yeah.
With a huge dragon.
That's what I want. That's what I want. I demand it. I demand it.
What if the background is the outline of the big teeth because you're sitting on the tongue with a camping burner and a light tan?
Oh my god, are we the cherries? Is that what's happening here? We're all gonna get jubileed. Why is it called Cherry's Jubilee?
I guess it was invented with somebody's jubilee.
Yeah.
Question.
It's a really good way of like getting a dish famous. Because you name it after a famous event that's happening.
Yeah. It's like coronation chicken or whatever.
Yeah.
Pavlova. No, that was a lady, wasn't it?
So it was Diamond Jubilee.
Ah. I wondered if it was an X-Men thing. Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed. I thought that this one would probably be a good one.
When was it written?
It's fairly aged, I believe. 1990.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if I was too old for it. Like, if I was too old by the time it came out, but like, no.
Sounds like you're exactly the right age.
Yeah.
Some of them just slip by.
Well, fortunately, we've got Frankie to rescue us.
It reminds me a little bit of, were any of you folks familiar with the Paper Bag Princess growing up?
Yeah. I've heard of it, but I don't think I know anything about it.
It's very...
One of my
I grew up with
friend's
that.
kids has it. It's great.
The Paper Bag Princess is basically it's again princess dragon stuff. A dragon arrives who destroys her castle, kidnaps Prince Ronald, and burns all her clothes, so she must look for something to wear, and finds herself a paper bag. Anyway, she goes to rescue the prince, then he's like, oh, but you're not all, princessy. And she's like, all right, well, fuck you then.
That sounds
quite a sweary kids book.
Dragon.
Awesome. Oh yeah, so Storytime is now officially a badass princess group. That's the only kind of thing that we deal with here.
I've always wanted to be a badass princess.
You are a badass princess.
I've always seen you as such, Nick.
Yeah.
That's what I've got you as in my phone.
Are we having a Xena Warrior Princess watch party?
Also, is anyone shipping Cimarine and Kazul yet? Was that just me?
Yep.
Yes, but I also read way ahead accidentally. Like, are you sure we're only doing 2 chapters a night?
For me, the moment was, oh, thank you not to speaking that way about my princess.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Also, Vor.
Yeah, definitely Vor.
I'm so sorry.
So,
Okay.
do we think that the lady who called out to her with the emerald trees has a bigger part to play in the story or not?
Presumably.
I do hope that the frog comes back.
Hmm?
I hope that the frog comes back.
We've met the voice of the frog before, I think in Stardust, but I can't remember who he played.
I think he was the little hairy man.
Is he the little hairy man? That
Maybe.
makes sense.
I lose complete track of what voices have been whom. So hopefully I won't do any massively inappropriate reappearances.
It would have been amazing if you'd have done the dragon for the dragon.
But this dragon's female.
This dragon is. I feel like she's a sort of like a kind of sexy lady version of the dragon.
But in the end, she wants the same thing, right? She wants a dinner made and a book sorted out.
Isn't that what we all want?
Katie definitely feeling Shrek.
I have to say, I really sort of empathize with the dragon with its endless piles of stuff lying around, just sort of all over the place. Like,
I wondered if this was a reference
it would be really
to,
fantastic if someone cleaned up the stuff. I know it's messy. I know I have too many possessions, but I just never quite get around to actually putting them in the right place.
Yeah.
Oh, I am the princess then.
I wonder.
Is it too early?
I wondered if this was a reference to role-playing games where you'll be fighting somebody and you'll look in somebody's kitchen drawer and they'll be like, oh look, an enchanted sword in someone's kitchen drawer.
A crepe pan.
Oh, I mean, usually it's just an enchanted cheese knife or something, but it's still useful.
You can't make crepes with an enchanted sheath knife. What were you saying, Rory Dan?
Oh, is it too early to start casting? Because I'm seeing the dragon as Carrie Ann Moss.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
She does have powerful energy about her. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, that's an incredible call. Okay, so who heavy, excited breathing and giggling from like everyone. Oh my god! Ivan, I've just seen. Speak to us so that the catch-up crew can see.
Hello, hello.
No.
Hold on, I'm going to spotlight you. Oh no, she's hungry. Quick, get her some
Or
cherries
tired.
jubilee. Or tired. Oh, that's very cute. Right, I think I'm going to finish the recording. Everyone say goodbye to the catch-up crew. Hello, goodbye.
Bye.
Hope you enjoyed it. See you soon. We love you.